Let's discover what's the key to a cleaner destiny. Let's talk biomass today.
All right, everybody, welcome back. You know, when we think about tackling climate change, we usually picture those fields of solar panels, right? Or those giant wind turbines kind of just like looming on the horizon.
Right, they become so iconic.
Exactly. But what if I told you there's another renewable energy source out there that's a little less, well, obvious, something a lot more humble, you know?
Oh, this is interesting. I like where this is going. What are we talking about?
Wood pellets.
Wood pellets, like for my grill.
Yep, you got it. Those little cylinders of compressed sawdust, often relegated to grilling duty, might actually hold a key to a greener future. And that's what we are diving into today.
I am intrigued. Let's do it.
Okay, so in this deep dive, we're going to pit wood pellets against the current energy heavyweight champ, fossil fuels. We're going to see if these pellets can really hold their own in the fight against climate change, you know.
I'm ready to be convinced.
Let's go. Let's start with, everyone's favorite topic. Money. We've all heard those warnings about climate change becoming an economic nightmare, but did you know that sticking with our fossil fuel dependence could end up costing the world an absolutely mind-blowing $2.4 trillion every single year by 2050, just from the climate disasters alone?
Yeah, that's a number that's hard to even wrap your head around, But it really underscores just how urgent it is to switch to more sustainable energy. And the interesting thing is wood pellets could actually be a really affordable option.
That's right. I mean, we're talking about wood pellets costing hundreds of dollars per ton versus the often crazy prices of oil, which seems to bounce around more than, I don't know.
A rubber ball.
Yeah, something like that. So it seems like switching to wood pellets could be good for the planet and easier on the wallet. But is that really true? What do you think?
Well, anytime you're thinking about adopting a new technology, there are always going to be some upfront costs, right? And that's definitely true for renewable energy, too. Setting up new infrastructure, whether it's for wind, solar, or wood pellets, it's an investment. But, and this is a big but, the cost of doing nothing, of sticking with fossil fuels, it's way, way more expensive in the long run. Think about it like this.
Okay, I'm listening.
Ignoring your health might seem cheaper now, right? But if you're not taking care of yourself, not going to the doctor, not taking care of those early warning signs, it can lead to some pretty hefty medical bills down the line. You might end up needing expensive treatments or medications, but if you invest in prevention, whether it's your health or the planet's health, it almost always pays off in the end.
It's that whole an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
And speaking of smart investments, it's really interesting to see who's already jumping on this whole wood pellet bandwagon. And it's not just who you might expect. Like, take Sweden, for example. Land of those minimalist furniture stores we all know and love.
Oh, yeah. They're definitely onto something with that whole minimalist aesthetic.
Right. But they're not just giving us stylish furniture. They're aiming for something even more impressive, complete carbon neutrality by 2045. And they're actually making some amazing progress.
Yeah, they're really leading the way in a lot of ways.
They really are. And a big part of their strategy, you guessed it, it's wood pellets. They're already generating more than 30% of their total energy from biomass, with wood pellets being a big chunk of that.
It's pretty impressive.
It really is. But here's the thing. It's not just those countries known for being, super eco-conscious who are making this move. Even countries like Japan, famous for their technology and efficiency, are starting to turn to biomass, including wood pellets, to break free from coal.
Yeah, Japan's a really interesting example because they've had to get seriously creative. I mean, they've got limited land, right?
Right.
So they don't have a ton of space for growing massive forests for biomass.
Right, so what are they doing?
Well, they're actually investing in sustainable forestry practices overseas. And they're securing wood pellet imports to meet their energy needs. So they're not just embracing a new energy source, they're creating new economic partnerships and international collaborations all around it.
That's really interesting. It really highlights how this whole wood pellet thing isn't just some niche trend. It's a global shift that's gaining some serious momentum.
Absolutely. Governments everywhere are realizing they need to find new ways to get energy. They can't just rely on the same old sources, especially fossil fuels. And wood pellets, they're looking like a pretty good option, a really adaptable solution in this whole energy transition.
Okay, so we've talked about how wood pellets could be good for the economy, good for international relations, and how a bunch of countries are already using them. But what about the big question? What about the environmental impact? I mean, at the end of the day, we are still talking about burning something to make energy, right? So how do wood pellets stack up when it comes to carbon emissions?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right. So, as we all know, burning fossil fuels releases all that ancient carbon back into the atmosphere, carbon that's been locked away for millennia. And that, my friends, is what's really messing with our planet's climate. But wood pellets, well, they work a little differently.
They do.
It-
And that's the key difference.
Exactly. Wood pellets are made from trees that were recently harvested. So the CO2 that's released when we burn them was actually absorbed from the air by those trees as they were growing. It's like nature has its own accounting system, it's constantly balancing the books.
I love that analogy because it's so true. It's a closed carbon loop. And that is absolutely essential if we want to hit our climate goals. And that's the beauty of wood pellets. Unlike fossil fuels, which keep adding more and more carbon to the atmosphere, wood pellets are carbon neutral. They basically give back what they take, making them a much more sustainable way to create energy.
It's like that friend who always remembers to pay you back. They're good for it.
Exactly.
This whole closed loop system is pretty amazing when you really stop and think about it. It's like nature's way of saying, hey, we can do this whole energy thing sustainably. We've got this. But are wood pellets really that perfect? Are there any downsides we need to consider?
That's the thing, right? Wood pellets, they're definitely a more sustainable choice than fossil fuels, but it's really important to be realistic. There's no magic bullet when it comes to energy. Every source has its own complexities.
What kind of complexities are we talking about with wood pellets?
Well, if we want to start using wood pellets on a large scale, we really need to be careful about how we're managing our forests. Sustainable forestry practices are going to be critical. We need to make sure we're not contributing to deforestation or harming biodiversity. And then there's also the emissions from transporting those pellets. We have to think about how we are getting them from the forests to the power plants.
So it's not quite as simple as just like flipping a switch and suddenly everything's powered by wood pellets.
Yeah, it would be great if it were that easy. But unfortunately, no. It's really about making sure that wood pellets are part of a much bigger strategy. And that strategy has to include renewable energy sources, energy efficiency, and sustainable practices across the board.
So it's about integrating wood pellets into a more holistic, multifaceted approach, right?
Yes. And we have to keep pushing the boundaries with research and development. We need to keep finding ways to be more efficient and sustainable at every single stage, from growing and harvesting the wood to transporting and using those pellets.
This is constant work in progress. Okay, so to sum up our little exploration of the world of wood pellets, it sounds like we've got a renewable resource that's easier on the wallet than fossil fuels, is already being used by governments worldwide, and has a much, much friendlier carbon footprint.
I'd say that's a pretty good summary.
But of course, like with anything, there are always those caveats. We have to make sure that we're being smart about how we're producing them and how we're using them.
Absolutely. We can't just assume that wood pellets are a perfect solution. We have to be mindful about how we incorporate them into our energy mix.
Exactly. So for our listeners who are now hopefully as fired up about wood pellets as I am, I want to leave you with this. How could you imagine this alternative energy source working in your own community? Could your kids' school be heated with wood pellets? What about that big factory down the street? Could they use them? Maybe your town could invest in sustainable forestry to make sure there's a steady, responsible supply of wood pellets. It's a really interesting thing to think about.